Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And for some reason it's doing the same thing as it did yesterday. Then I cannot see an image of myself, but I'm assuming that you can see me. Please do let me know if you can see me, because I cannot see me, which is not a problem. So if you could just acknowledge whoever's watching that, can they see an image of me appearing on the screen or not? Otherwise, I might have to reboot it, refresh. Okay. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I need a new laptop, or maybe my laptop is needing some tender love and care and attention. So anyway, welcome to our FiqHour, inshallah. Slightly later than schedule, 7:45, but as I've said, we've mentioned previously that it's always a bit difficult with Salah, Maghrib, Iftar, whatever, in order to then make the time to get on. But we're here, inshallah. So the first thing we want to speak about really is, or the theme rather for today, is healthy living in body, mind, and spirit. So firstly, I've described three aspects of the human. The body, which is our organic body that we have, and this body goes through various phases. Obviously, when we're in our mother's womb, start off just as cells going through a clot of blood until eventually we're a fetus, and then we're a sort of fully formed baby, and we're born, and then we go through the various stages of childhood until we reach adolescent, and then we go through into adult, full grown sort of phase, and then we reach our prime, and then we start to kind of get what's termed as middle age, and then we start to get into old age. So our organic body goes through lots of differences. We have then what's called the mind. Okay, the mind is, we normally point to the head when we speak about the mind. The mind is our intellect, our reasoning, our ability to understand things, rationalize things, look at arguments, understand the world around us, these sorts of things. And then the third stage is what we refer to as the soul or the spirit. Okay, and that is more where our kind of beliefs come in, our feelings, our motivations, our driving forces, what we deem to be of value, what we deem to be sound and good morally, and what we deem to be morally wrong, and things of that nature. Now, as Muslims, we are encouraged and enjoined and arguably made compulsory upon us to keep all three of those aspects of the human self in prime condition. So let's focus primarily on the body first, and then we work into the other areas. The body is clearly important. We know there's narrations which mention that the Prophet ﷺ said that only consume that amount of food, okay, that, for example, fills a third of your stomach, and leave a third for water, and then leave a third for air, meaning never eat to your fill. We know, for example, as you know, especially when we're breaking fast, and as we're eating, naturally our stomach is empty, so our mind is telling us to eat. But obviously we're eating much faster than the signal that the stomach can send back to the brain to say, whoa, stop, man, we've got enough, stop. But because we're eating so much, we don't allow that to that's why we overeat, and then we can't get up, then we feel sick and all the rest of it. And when we overeat, what that does, you see, is that if we're not going to burn those calories now, then those calories get preserved as fat, and that fat starts to grow on us. So the fat is a cause for so many diseases, so many illnesses, whether it's cardiovascular, heart condition, angina, heart attack, stroke, things of that nature, or whether it's to do with, say, sugar, diabetes, and things of that nature as well, and many other diseases. We can even talk about cancers and things of that nature, whereby a person, due to excessive eating, and also, unfortunately, it's not just the excessive eating, it's the type of food that we eat. So instead of having a nice balanced diet of proteins, some carbohydrates, and maybe a small amount of fat, what we tend to do is be very much focused primarily on the fat. So we're getting a lot of fat, a lot of greasy food, a lot of fatty food, a lot of sugary desserts. And then we're getting quite a lot of carbs, and our protein tends to be very, very low. So what is useful what's called referred to as lean mass, we're not really giving that much focus on. And what is the worst type is, which is not very useful at all, in fact it's damaging, we're giving more focus on, and its nutritional value is exceptionally low. And the reason for that is why is it that we've got this focus where we're not necessarily eating to nourish, but we're eating to fulfill our shahwats, our desires? So the type of foods I just mentioned there, the desserts, the fried food, all these are what are referred to as luxury foods. They are those foods which we're eating because of the taste, not necessarily because of its nourishing value. Whereas if we go back, or maybe even only like 50 years or 60 years, we'll find that the amount of food that was being eaten was considerably less. And on top of that, it was a balanced diet, not kind of too much focused on sugary food, not too much focused on fried food. Some statistics which colleagues shared with me. I was on a podcast a few days ago with a chap who deals a lot in the halal food market. And he shared some statistics with me which were eye-watering. One statistic he shared with me is that we as Muslims are responsible in the UK for consuming 75% of the mutton. 75% of the mutton. We are only about a 5% population-wise, and that's how much we eat. In essence, if Muslims stopped eating mutton, the mutton market would collapse in the UK. So it's very dependent on the Muslim palate. The second thing is, which is not as high, is we are responsible for consuming 15% of the poultry market. So again, even though we're 5%, we consume considerably more than what we are. So you can see that we're eating a lot of meat and we're eating a lot of chicken. And with eating a lot of meat and eating a lot of chicken does come diseases, being overweight, obesity, and things of that nature. Now, there is no doubt, and if there is any doubt, I want to clarify that. There is no doubt that what we're eating not only affects our body, which also affects our health, but also then affects our mind. It makes us lazy. It makes us lethargic. It takes away our desire for ibadah. We want to sleep more now. We want to rest more. Okay. We become more sort of spoilt. Okay. We become more spoilt. We become more lethargic. We become less motivated to achieve great goals. We're happy to just kind of meander along. So it affects the mind, and it also affects the soul, the spirit, which is one of the reasons why during the month of Ramadan, we remove the consumption of food. We remove the consumption of water. We remove those things which are our part of our shahwats, our desires, in order to weaken the physical part of our body so that our spiritual side of our body can become stronger and our mind can become sharper. We know, for example, that if most of the time you see people who work will not want to eat because they know it's like when a few ulama, friends of mine and myself, we used to work at the madrasa and the school, and we had some statistical data analysis to carry out. We wouldn't order any food, so we'd get there for about sort of 8 in the evening. We'd get there for 8 in the evening, and we'd just start number crunching. We'd just be working on numbers, carrying out all the data analysis, doing some statistical analysis on it, drawing some conclusions, and we'd carry on until about, I'd say about 1 in the morning. So for about good, 3-4 hours. And then we had a natural break because we were waiting for some other results to come through. So what we would do is we would get everything ready and we think, well, we've got another half an hour or an hour to wait now. Let's go get something to eat, because we knew as soon as we ate, it slows you down. Similarly, when you're doing manual work, you're doing decorating in the house or you're doing some work around the house, as soon as lunchtime comes, working after lunch becomes more difficult. And that's why you find even in the school day, you find most of the lessons are before lunch. Less lessons are after lunch. So what you normally get is a couple of lessons after lunch. The 4 or 5 lessons come before lunch. Why? Because we know that as soon as you eat, your body slows down naturally. So therefore, ensuring that we're eating right is absolutely essential. Let's now turn to the mind. Okay, what about the mind? Well, depending on what we are accessing, what we are watching, what we are being exposed to, what ideas we're being exposed to, what philosophies we're being exposed to, what worldviews we're being exposed to, can naturally affect the mind. And it makes us think in a certain way. And that also has an impact on our soul. So the mind does that as well. And then finally, obviously, the soul, we know that if we're not conducting acts of ibadah, if we're not conducting acts of worship, then obviously the soul becomes somewhat polluted. It becomes somewhat disdain marked. Okay, and it requires now the cleanliness process, like the acts of worship that we have to do. So rest assured, we are responsible to keep our body, mind, and soul pure. We must try to keep a good balance in the type of food that we're eating and the quantity of the food that we're eating in order to keep that well balanced, because we know that that affects the mind as well as it affects the soul. And also we need to be careful what we expose our eyes to in terms of the how it impacts the mind, how it impacts on our soul. So that was around healthy living in body, mind, and spirit. So we now will open up to some questions, either related directly to the topic or those which are outside of the topic. So first, so I'm assuming you still can see the video imagery, because as I said, on my side, I cannot see it. Assalamu alaikum, Sahab. A brother asked whether the release of madhi, not money, would make a person baligh. No, it wouldn't. Okay. It would have to be the release of money that would make a person baligh, because there could be fluid, because he won't know if it's money. He might just think it's just fluid being released from the male anatomy, and therefore it could be anything. It could even be wadi rather than money. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. If masjid does dua after salah, what should we do? You can also make dua after salah. There is nothing wrong in making dua after salah. The afzal position is that you make dua after your sunan. Not, you make a very short dua between your fard and your sunnah. So a short dua between the fard and the sunnah, and then you start your sunnah immediately, and then you make your longer dua after the sunnah. However, it is permissible to also make the dua after the fard instead of the sunnah. There is permissibility. So if you're doing that, then there's nothing wrong in you making the dua, but obviously you don't need to make it a jama dua, just make your own dua. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Also, if they do dua when they finish the Quran in Taraweeh, again, that's just a chanak, yani, an opportune moment to make dua. So there's nothing wrong in joining that dua at all. It's only if it becomes considered as necessary, binding, you're looked down upon if you don't join in, things of that nature, then yes. But other than that, it's something which a person can partake in because it's an opportune moment to supplicate. Again, I would suggest that people make their du'as alone. The only issue I have with these du'as that take place in Taraweeh is it turns into a little bit of a showpiece. What happens is, the places that I've been, is the lights get switched off and the Imam Sahib goes on full mode and he's crying, he's making himself cry. He's, not close to wailing, but he's pretty heavy. People start crying and you feel the urge to cry because you just kind of, the moment is getting you, because, it becomes a show of riyah. For me, dua is a very private affair. That's why I find it very strange how we can do something very private so publicly. It's a private affair between you and your Rabb. It's the most intimate conversation that can ever take place between a slave and his master. So for me, when people do it in a public way, I find it a bit pretentious. I'll be honest with you. I find it a bit pretentious, and I find it a little bit problematic. Don't get me wrong. Okay. There's nothing wrong in a person making dua, a congregational dua, or even a dua whilst other people are around. There's nothing wrong in that. The only thing I'm saying in particular with the Taraweeh is the kind of show that gets built around it and the expectation now. So the expectation is that Imam is going to make a half an hour dua, and you see people comparing, oh, our Imam, his was a 45-minute dua. SubhanAllah, was it? Yeah. Our Imam was crying. Oh, our Imam was crying more than your Imam was crying. No. Our Imam was wailing. No. Our Imam nearly collapsed. Oh, goodness me. And there were people collapsing in the masjid, and it becomes like a thing of comparison and a thing of show. This is where I have serious issues with, because what is the maqsad of what is the purpose of this? What is the intention behind this? This is dangerous. This is going into an area which is seriously problematic. So I find it really something that I find difficult to bear. Also, is it impermissible to go to congregational dhikr? In Bolton, there's a masjid that does annual dhikr majlis. I'm not going to say. The thing is, there are different tariqas, and some tariqas do enjoin congregational dhikr. However, my advice would be is that people do dhikr, but do dhikr on their own, focusing on themselves in their own method. This was the practice that we can see from the Salaf, and it's better to practice that what we witness from the Salaf. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi, man. How are you? Okay, ask away, people. But for now, I'm just going to pick up some questions on the Telegram channel. And you can ask away. I will jump back onto the YouTube in a bit, but let me see what's on here. There was a question I got earlier which I need to pick up on. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Okay, I've done that one. This one. So my apologies to put this message on this group, as I saw it somewhere and I'm forwarding it here. It is said that when a person dies in Ramadan or any other days without any struggle or anything, it is called a good death. I don't know where people get this, that if people die without any struggle, it's a good death. That's not necessarily true. Dying in Ramadan is a good death. There's no doubt about that. But dying without a struggle, in fact, I could not find, if memory serves me well now, having said that, I could not find a hadith specifically, if I remember now. I'm going into my memory banks now. I could not find a hadith specifically talking about the merits of death during Ramadan. But I do remember there's a narration which speaks about the death on a Friday. But obviously, by surmising that the gates of Jahannam are closed and the gates of Jannah are open, one can sort of summarize from there or extract from there that it shows that there is some possibility that if a person dies that they're going to go to Jannah. So we can surmise from there. So there is nothing which says that dying without any struggle is a good death. Okay, so that's the first point. However, the Palestinians are the chosen one loved ones. We cannot say that the Palestinian people are the chosen ones loved ones. We cannot say that. No one knows that. So why are they getting death in such a state? Because they're getting death as shaheed, shuhada. So however that is, it's death. So, getting crushed, waghera, waghera. So there's nothing wrong in that. So the question is it called a good death for a believing Muslim? A good death is a death in which you are shaheed. That is the best of deaths. So those that die as shaheeds from amongst the Palestinians, that is a good death, and it's happening in Ramadan. So it's a good death. Doesn't matter what happens. We know, for example, I don't like using this as an example, but let me use this as an example. Is Hamza radiallahu anhu. When Hamza radiallahu anhu was martyred, he had his body mutilated by Hind at that time, who ate from his liver and who cut the shuhada's noses and ears off and made a necklace from it. So what do we say? Do we say that no, this is the greatest of death as a shaheed. So there's nothing wrong in that. Okay. The intention of this question is just to get the knowledge and not to hurt anyone's sentiments or offend anyone. Not a problem. Hopefully nobody should be offended. When someone's genuinely seeking ilm, there should be no offense. Okay, so hopefully I've answered that. Next one. Okay, there was this question which I didn't really understand. Is there any... Oh, no, it's not it. How would you explain the concept of manifestation from an Islamic perspective? So I don't know what manifestation is, so I asked the sister to explain. So she explained, and this is what she said. From what I have heard being discussed about manifestation, the focus of control shifts from being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to people themselves and encourages people to think they are in control of their own life, their own taqdeer. And any good that happens in their life is due to them manifesting it, not necessarily through effort or actions on their part, but purely because they've manifested it through positive energy. How would you explain this to a Muslim who has started to practice this? So there was a group of people that were referred to as the Qadariyah. And the Qadariyah's belief was, so they were a particular sect, in a philosophical sect in very early Islam, and they could not square the issue that why would Allah punish a people who do something that they were predestined to do, And why would Allah reward a people who do good because of what they were predestined to do? Surely there has to be some merit from the person who's committing the act. If that person is doing an act because it's destined for him, then why is he being punished for it? And if that person is doing an act because it's been predestined for him, why is he getting rewarded for it? Where is the ownership of the individual of that act? There doesn't seem to be any ownership here. There seems to be predestination. And if it's predestination, then why are the doers of that act culpable, both rewarded and also punished? It makes no sense. So they developed this Qadariya, and they said, actually, it's the person who, I won't use the word manifest, but it's the person who is determining his destination. And that only fits in their heads. That only fits as to why he should be punished for doing bad deeds and why he should be rewarded for doing good deeds, because that's the only way it makes rational sense. It only makes rational sense that you are responsible for your deeds, and you cannot lay it at the blame of Allah and say, oh, it was my destiny, and hence the reason why I performed that act. And the Mu'tazila then also took this particular theological position. And they were also referred to as the rationalists, who only would accept things, beliefs and systems within Islam that would make rational sense. And if they did not make rational sense, they would rationalize them away until they made rational sense. So that's the issue there. So therefore, it is not permissible to believe that and to think that, because this is a belief. And obviously a belief can take a person out of the fold of Islam. So they cannot believe that. We have to. وَالْقَدْرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ. You know, we know the dua, or not the dua, but the Iman Mujmal, Mufassal rather. Amantu billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulihi wal yawm al-akhir wal qadri khayrihi wa sharrihi min Allah ta'ala wal ba'th ba'da al-maut. And that long version means that I believe in predestination, it's good, and it's bad, it's from Allah, and I believe in the resurrection after death. So therefore, a Muslim who starts to practice this would be on extremely dangerous grounds. On the topic of being healthy, would it be considered haram for someone who has intolerance to certain foods to consume these foods? Example, someone with a lactose intolerance continue to eat dairy, as this would be harming the body. I assume this is different to generally unhealthy foods, as there is definite harm to the body due to intolerance. Yes, one could say that, absolutely. Where if a body is created, Allah has created a body in a certain way, where certain foods are going to be problematic, like, you know, many people have peanut allergies, and obviously they get, you know, they have struggle breathing due to consuming peanuts or even peanut butter or even small parts of peanut residue in anything. So yes, if something is a harm for you, then that's even more so that person should avoid that food. Absolutely so. Okay, so that's that. Let me see what's come on the gents. I think all the gents have been answered. Yeah, alhamdulillah, all the gents have been answered. Barakallah fiqh, all the ladies have been answered. So that's good, mashallah. Let's come back onto here. Is there anything that's been added here? People tend to mix their activism with Islam when it comes to, yes, it's because it's a very emotional topic. And because it's a very emotional topic, it gets people going beyond the boundaries of Islam. We have to be very, very important that the most difficult time to stay within the hudud of Islam is at the emotional time. You know, when I used to discuss with colleagues and people in other areas about management, I say management is a relatively easy skill, because if you have good systems, then 80%, even 90% of the time, your systems will manage the project. Your systems will manage the people. But for that 10, 20%, where you need to step in and start dealing with issues is the measure of a manager. So I see many people with the title manager, or they've got a senior role, and unfortunately, they just don't know how to do that. And they always say, oh, this has gone wrong, whatever. Naturally, your management skills are only going to come in when things go wrong. Rarely, if ever, your management skills are going to be needed when everything's working fine, because why would you need to intervene? There's no reason for you to intervene. So when we staying within the hudud is easy. It's only when emotion kicks in does staying within the hudud become difficult. Okay. So for example, if somebody who's done harm to you, being just to that person is difficult. But if someone's done good to you, being just to that person is easy. Okay, so therefore, staying within the hudud is easy when everything's working out for you. You know, everything is roses. It's not a problem. It's only when you're in a difficult situation, either financially, or you're in a difficult situation emotionally because someone's done some injustice to you, that's the time where you're staying within the hood becomes difficult. That's like when you're holding on to the burning ember, because when you're holding on to the burning ember, then that becomes hard to hold on to. And that's obviously when the issues arise. So again, that's why when it comes to things like Philistine, when it comes to things like emotional aspects, that's when I was talking to somebody in Pakistan this 3-4 days ago, and he says, "Oh, the troubles are still going on." I says, "Oh, where?" He says, "Here in Pakistan." And I said, "Oh, what's going on?" He says, "Oh, it's the Pakistanis and the Afghans are bombing each other." Well, actually, it wasn't somebody; it was my uncle. It's just I talked to a few people in Pakistan, so I was trying to remember who it was who was sharing with me. So it's my uncle, mashallah, Allah bless him. So he was sharing with me that that's what's going on. So there's that war, unfortunately, brewing up where there's Muslim brother and Muslim brother. But we seem to not get too much kind of emotionally involved in that because for whatever reason, that's wrong. We know, for example, between Saudi and Yemen, that's been going on for so long. The Yemeni people have been literally pushed to starvation, but we kind of turn a blind eye to it. So it's always emotion kicks in. It's always something that, and sometimes, we're always looking for a rebel with a cause. We want a cause to fight for. And this becomes something to fight for. So we have to be very careful, and we have to listen to our specialist ulama, those who have specialism in fiqh, not just somebody who's an alim, because that doesn't mean anything, because we have many ulama who can sometimes act due to emotion, that can take a cold clinical view of something and give us some direction and guidance. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Wearing jewelry of silver like a chain or bracelet for men, is it permissible or forbidden? It is forbidden. There's this misnomer and misunderstanding that because there is some permissibility of a man wearing a silver ring, one assumes by that then that he can wear any jewelry which is silver. That's a wrong reasoning to make. Men aren't permitted to wear jewelry for an obvious reason, because men is for women to wear jewelry. It's for women to beautify themselves for their husbands. It's not necessary for a man to beautify himself in that sense, because this is not a form of beautification in a man. The form of beautification in a man is his manliness, okay, which is measured by his beard, his chivalry, his strength, his forbearance, his attitude, his lack of laziness, his desire, his passion, his work ethic. These things are a measure of a man. Wearing trinkets and wearing rings is not a measure of a man. That is obviously how a woman is supposed to behave. So there is this misnomer that because gold is impermissible for men, and because it possibly a silver ring is permissible for a man, then men think by extension that they can also wear silver bracelets, silver necklaces, silver earrings, silver whatever, in order to also consider that to be permissible, which is not the case. Okay, I'll give another minute or so for you to put some questions up. In the meantime, I'll just check if there's anything else that's come in via the other formats. So whilst we are waiting for them questions, it gives me time, inshallah, to introduce the theme for all being well tomorrow, inshallah. So far, we're doing so far so good. But if it's not tomorrow, it's the next FiqHour. Inshallah, I've planned for it to be tomorrow. And that is how to make dawah. One of our responsibilities as Muslims living in a minority situation is to proclaim our message, which we have had the good fortune of being born with. and potentially growing up in communities of Muslims, and also the ability to be trained in a maktab situation when we were children, or the ability to have been to some kind of formal or even informal method of education, tarbiyah, in which the virtues of Islam have been instilled within us. But when we're doing this work and we're reaching out to non-Muslims in particular, especially in this day and age where Muslims are heavily under the microscope, so in a way our work is pretty much done easily because we're already the topic of the staff room, we're already the topic of the social media. So it's not like we have to introduce the conversation has already been introduced, but it's more of a case of is how do you steer that conversation, because unfortunately it is a negative conversation, but how do you steer that conversation and start to make dawah in those circumstances? We know it's important, but sometimes you have to be very careful as well at those formative periods of that person where you're now opening them up to a whole new worldview, a whole new system, which they might be quite alien to them. So we're going to hopefully speak about that, inshallah, is how to make dawah. That will be our theme for tomorrow, inshallah. How to respond to people who say it is time for Muslims to do jihad to save Muslims and Muslim countries in Palestine and Masjid Al-Aqsa. Well, you see, doing jihad, which is a very, broad point to make, is there has to be an amir. See, jihad is a political and religious obligation, or let me rephrase that. Jihad is a religious obligation under a political framework. That's better. So there has to be a political framework for that to happen. Allow me to give you an example. So when we look at the time in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ had no political system in place. He was not the leader of the people in the sense of the word politically. He was a leader of the Muslims, and the Muslim community was growing and growing, but he had no kind of political framework to work from. Even when they made the first hijrah to Abyssinia, the first group of people that went to Abyssinia, and then they returned. And then when the second group went to Abyssinia, we find, for example, that the Muslim community was growing and it was quite a sizable community. But even then, there was no talk about political frameworks and those religious obligations which come through political frameworks. It was only when the Prophet ﷺ went to Medina, and now he became a state leader, because in those days, city-states existed. Okay, so we had Damascus as a city-state, we had Medina as a city-state, we had Mecca as a city-state, where basically a city was considered as a state. So Medina was a city-state. It was only at that time, once this political framework existed, that the concept of jihad came in. So right now, if a person who's speaking from the UK, what's his political framework? If a person is speaking from France, what's his political framework? If a person is speaking from Pakistan, what's his political framework? Because the person who's in Pakistan, his wilayat is to the Pakistani government. So if the Pakistani government hasn't given the okay, then how can he go against that? So until that political framework exists, there is no way really of doing that. So it's okay, it's making those kind of saber-rattling rhetorical statements, but that has to have substance. And that has to have some structure. Now, if obviously Jordan decides, or Egypt decides, or whoever else, neighboring countries decide that, okay, enough's enough, this is a genocide on a level that hasn't been seen for a long, long time, and we will not tolerate it. And if the UN is not going to do something about it, and if the powers that be are not going to do something about it, then we, as the states around this area, are going to put a stop to it. Now they have armies. Okay, the Egypt has armies. Jordan has armies. They have armies. Now they would say to their armies that's it, and they may recruit and say, okay, the ulama of that particular country may say, right, this is now, we're also making it as a religious obligation. Not only is it the fact that those people who are in the army need to go, but this is now open to recruits from any male of the age between 18 and 40 or whatever their criteria might be, that can now join in that. And then they may get support from the ulama that can sort of, give a fatwa as well. But that would be for those neighboring states. how then would it impact people in Afghanistan? How would it impact people in Iran? How would it impact people in India? How would it impact people in Indonesia? We all live now in separate national states, and our wilaya is to individual national states. And that's something that needs to be understood. I just literally said 15 minutes earlier, right now, Afghanistan and Pakistan are exchanging bombs. So how is it going to be? So is that jihad? Is the fact that Pakistan's army is firing bombs across the Afghan army and the Afghan army is firing bombs to Pakistan? Is that jihad? Is it not jihad? Are they going to have time to go and solve other problems when they've got their own issues on their doorstep? So that's what I mean. So it seems very romanticized. It seems very rhetorical. It seems very saber rattling. It's a nice phrase to use. It kind of shows that we have something within our arsenal. But the first thing that needs to happen is the political framework needs to be built. The understanding within the minds and the hearts of the people has to be made before anything of this nature is going to come about. So it's all right making these statements, or whoever is making these statements to you, but it's very naive and lacks any true understanding of the concept of jihad. I'll give another few minutes, inshallah, just in case there's some other questions that are bubbling in before we part company for today. I've already given the theme for tomorrow, inshallah. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 themes. Tomorrow is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we have just enough themes for the number of days. So we won't take any more themes. Sunday, there's going to be no FiqHour because inshallah, I will be traveling. And then inshallah, all being well, Monday, we should be back to our FiqHour. So let's see how that goes. The reason why I'm saying talking in a hesitant manner is because obviously I will be away on I'tikaf, so I don't know what's going to be happening. I have already told them that I do want to schedule that in, but if they're literally rinsing me for across the whole day, it depends how much energy I have left and how much voice I have left to be able to run a session. But inshallah, the plan is there. We will obviously give you the times as to when that will be, inshallah. So I think we have reached a natural end for today. Any issue? Ameen. Barakallah fiqh. Appreciate the du'as. Jazakumullah khair. So inshallah, till tomorrow, all being well, same time, same place, 7:45 is our FiqHour time. Theme is how to make dawah. Inshallah, till then. Wa akhiru da'wana. And alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.